Let's talk U.S. men's Olympic team. Marko Mitrovic, who's going to be coaching this one, dropping his 18-player roster. There's also, going to be 4 alternates going to the Paris Games for the United States. Of the 18 players named, 15 have been capped with the full men's national team. There are 3 overage players. Remember, it's an under-23 tournament. They are Miles Robinson, Walker Zimmerman, and Djordje Mihailovic. Herc, I'll start with you. What's your initial reaction to the roster?
It looks like a lot of...
Yeah.
No, well, let me say this. It looks like a lot of
So I guess
clubs wouldn't release their players.
Yeah, that's one of the
normal.
backstories.
That's normal.
Yes.
Both MLS and European clubs
Normal.
wouldn't release players.
I think it's unfortunate from the Major League Soccer clubs.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
More so than the European clubs.
Yeah, well, my immediate reaction to why does it matter? Why do you, give a leeway to the European clubs is, well, there's a risk-reward there in a situation with promotion relegation. You can get relegated. One of these players gets hurt, gets injured, whatever the case may be. That's your asset, and you can get relegated. Whereas
Coventry City said apparently no on Haji Wright.
Yes.
Potential overage.
Potential overage. And when it comes to Major League Soccer, you may risk a championship run. In those 3 games that are gone, you can make that up because it's Major League Soccer. And I say this respectfully from a guy who played on a team that made it up when we were terrible until late August and ended up winning MLS Cup. There's much more leeway there. And I just think it'd be so good, the PR for Major League Soccer. Imagine a team with so many Major League Soccer players that made a run in the Olympics. And I'm talking about their own country. Because there's perception from the rest of the world, that's great. But in your own country where the Olympics matter to the majority of Americans, they know the Olympics, it could have just been good PR. And what I will say is just looking at the build of this roster, man, you took 1-9, Duncan McGuire.
True 9, right.
1 true 9. Where does that leave you if Duncan goes down? When there was talk of a Brandon Vazquez, when you maybe could have gotten another player or just decided to trust another player in that depth position. And I'll end with this. How unfortunate, incredibly unfortunate it is that there's 18 players only called into this tournament where Copa America 26, the Euros 26. So now the decision for this manager is those players who are on the bench, because my 3 overage players will play, they will have to play every single game. I have to trust those players, but the players on the bench have to be multifunctional, different positions to help me cover. I just think it's very unfortunate all around.
I can tell you. Did I see it correct that it had 3 goalkeepers?
No, one
2
was
goalies, the
alternate.
3rd is the alternate.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, because I was about to say, if you're short on numbers, you're not taking 3 goalkeepers. That's the one thing I would say. But the other thing I would say is that, and you don't want to put players in this position, right? But if there were some over 23 players that indeed could be or could have been part of this and were approached to be part of this, these players could have gone to their clubs and push it if they really wanted to. Now, you don't want to be part of that conversation because as a player, obviously, your bread and butter is your club team and your job security and all of that. And I've been there myself, so I quite understand being in the middle of it. It's not comfortable. But if you were approached to do it and you felt like you wanted to be a part of this, you can push for these things and you can get to some sort of agreement with your club. It doesn't always work out. It's not always a positive outcome, but it's not. I imagine that they approach many players. And I imagine that they would have approached many clubs. And the first reaction of every club would have been, no. Somebody has to push from the inside, and that has to be the player. And whether that's right or wrong, that's a responsibility that lies on the player that perhaps that player didn't want.
You're talking about overage players. Let me give you some names of the players who are of age. I mean, Christopher Lund, Malik Tillman, actually, he can't, I think, because he already played in the Olympic qualifying process with Germany. But Ricardo Pepi, Johnny Cardoso, Joe Scally, Gio Reyna, Folarin Balogun, who entered this equation as U23 player, but ultimately they can't do anything because the clubs decide, because this isn't a fully sanctioned FIFA tournament, because this is a youth tournament, and the clubs are going to be like, why am I letting you go to this?
But it also used to be a situation where if you had played in a World Cup and you were of age, you were still considered an overage player. So, but I was an overage player for the 96 Olympics, and it worked out where I missed preseason. I didn't miss any part of a
Were
league
you with
situation.
at the time, Leicester?
Well, I was at Millwall, but then I just got sold to Leicester afterwards.
What was the club's response?
But
they didn't care?
I didn't miss anything. Preseason, what would you rather have, a preseason in competitive matches or a preseason in non-competitive matches?
What do you think of these overage players? I got to be honest, a little bit underwhelming. Some of that's position. I know there's obviously a need at central defense here if they're taking both Zimmerman and Robinson, but
But a
Jordi
lot of it also
Mihailovic,
happens because,
especially in light of what Herc said, there's no 9. Like, bring me a
I'm
goal scorer.
I'm trying
Right?
to think
That's
in
very true.
'96, we wouldn't have been involved in a Copa Americas because Copa America was '95. So you weren't like involved in 2 separate tournaments in the same summer.
Yeah.
I think that's the big issue.
You're
The
saying a
big
lot of the
issue
big
you're
names
having
are crossed off already.
are crossed off because they already played in a tournament, and then I think what the problem is, the club is then saying, we don't want you playing in 2 tournaments.
Correct.
So if it was a situation where they said, oh, don't play in a Copa America in your most competitive environment before a World Cup in 2 years, yeah, I think that was more of the issue.
Case to Sebi's point, though, I mean, we did a segment on Diego Luna here where we're just judging on him declining,
Yes.
not being being an alternate. But when you look at this now roster, because we didn't have the full list then, you're like, where's the 9? So if it's only one 9, why not go out and get a 9? And knowing that you have a few
With
playmakers,
one of your overages, you're
with one of
saying.
your overage
Yeah.
players, and you're noticing you have a few playmakers like a Diego Luna, like a Brian Gutierrez, like
Right.
an Esmer who plays for New England
England.
Revolution.
That's all part of that process.
Then you can go there and say, this just fits more in this puzzle. But when you see the full puzzle and you start seeing how this is pieced together, you start asking yourself, why?
Mihailovic, 16 goal involvements this year in MLS. Luna, 13. So it's not that much of a difference.
But it's not, and I'm not picking apart Mihailovic. I'm picking apart the decision.
Well, but I'm saying if you have a Luna that's
Correct.
pretty much the same as Mihailovic,
or
why
a
are you burning an
Gutierrez
overage
or an
there?
Esmer is
Yeah,
what I'm saying.
that's the big question, and that would have to be a dive, with the manager and the process of why they chose certain players based off of limitations. You talked about center back, but then also, is there personality issues? Is there what? Like I said, that's what we don't know, but that is a very valid point. If you have a player of age, and that means you can fill a spot that is missing. So the question, if you're going to pull an overage player, you already said it. They're playing every minute. They have to. Why are you going to waste that spot for a squad position? So is that dynamic a little bit funky and that we don't know about? And kind of what we've always said. Why not? What's wrong with being a little more open to the decision process? And then that doesn't leave people like us in these sort of shows kind of guessing why decisions were made.
I'm not guessing in this one. I have to imagine that you just mentioned the name Brandon Vasquez, who would seem to be ideal for this sort of thing, right? A guy who had a really good season in Mexico, so on and so forth, and wasn't involved in Copa America, so what's the excuse? Well, the excuse is very simple.
Clubs.
Liga MX already started. And so they're saying,
Yeah.
no.
Right.
And again, it's this uncomfortable position that I mentioned earlier that the player just doesn't want to be a part of. And if you're Brandon Vasquez, if indeed you were approached, and this is speculation, if indeed he was approached, how much do you push? How much do you...
Well, let me ask, how important are the Olympics? Because he always kind of, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it feels like you always kind of play down the importance of the Olympics. Obviously, here in the United States...
the importance of the results in the Olympics.
Okay, in the United States, we focus on the Olympics beyond soccer, like all the other sports, so we know it's big here. How important is it to a player? How important is it within the international football community?
If we're looking at it from my perspective and from Venezuela, they're amazingly important because we've never made it, right? And so, but beyond that, I do think when you think of big teams in South America, they're not losing their minds by winning the Olympic Games. They're not going crazy if they're winning the Olympic Games. It was important for Brazil when the Olympics were in Brazil,
in
right?
2016, yeah.
And that was significant for them in that moment. But in general, historically, it hasn't been important because it's not considered one of the main competitions. It's not part of the culture of the game, and it always has been considered and treated as sort of a secondary competition where you send the younger guys.
To Ali's point, the moment that Kylian Mbappé was rumored, reported to go to Real Madrid, immediately it shifted to, will they negotiate with Real Madrid to let him go to the Olympics? So, and look what France has at their disposal, and they are the host country. The last Olympics, they're 9, and I say this with all due respect because I'm a massive fan. He's a Tigre, André Pierre Gignac, but certainly not the player pool they can dip from because these clubs won't allow these players to go.
I was there in 2016 at the Rio Olympics, and Neymar played in that.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal that he was there,
Yeah.
that he played, that he performed the way they did, and eventually they won the gold medal.
And don't forget, and this is not a coincidence, this is on the heels of Brazil having lost the semifinal against Brazil in the 2014 World Cup 7-1. And so there was this humiliation about Brazilians football. And so therefore, there is zero chance that Brazil was not going to put everything that they could into winning the Olympics.
All right, so the U.S. roster then is set for the 2024 Olympics coming up this summer in Paris. Coming up on Sunday, we've got a special ESPN FC, both here on ESPN Plus as well as ESPN2. We'll be looking ahead to both finals of the Copa America as well as the European Championships.